were being witnessed all throughout history, and their methodologies are the exact same. And it wasn't until I found what's called the ultimate black mass that everything came together for me. That's when I realized the uncomfortable truth is that, okay, this is not just a creature of the imagination. There are too many ingredients for this not to be a recipe. That's where I'm at, brother.
Oh, no. And that's just it. The idea of these things being in so many facets, being mentioned in numerous societies, numerous religious texts throughout time, not just in Judeo-Christian concept. And once again, that idea of incubus and succubus that we know of, the male and female demons that have been around since the time of Lilith and things like that. And really, that's a lot, I guess, of the origin of that is that Lilith became the incubus when she was cast out and replaced with Eve. And that began her want to breed with humanity and move things forward. But do you believe that these things are demonic in nature? Do you think that they are demon as we classically believe in the Judeo-Christian sense, Nathaniel, or something else?
Well, I kind of first I did. At first, right? Obviously, I was okay. These are horns and hooves, and any and all data sets that I acquired, they were filtered through that lens. As it sits right now, I believe these are practitioners like we've never seen before, an entire species of practitioners, and that the model I inherited of demonology was essentially, okay, these are entities that we worship or that other practitioners worship. And yet I encountered an entity or entities that they don't fall underneath that banner, that linguistic guideline. Whatever these are, they're working their own sorcery. And it's sorcery that's alien to us. It's interreligious, cross-cultural. In some cases, I've experienced them in hauntings. Like I had one case study, a lady sent me photographic evidence where her and her daughter were living in a house. There was a malevolent entity present. And before they actually saw the scarification and scratch marks on their skin, they felt it. And she films it. Wow. It's fascinating. She even, from underneath the skin to the surface. And so, again, I mention this often with the remote viewer's son, and I speak to him. He told me a story about his father who experienced that exact phenomenon, where whatever these were, they were sorcerers. Mm. They were not alien, right? These were practitioners, but they were practitioners. Again, it's almost a paradox, dichotomy. It was almost like they were alien practitioners. They didn't look human, but they were practicing sorcery on him.
That is an interesting thing to bring up, the idea, because, I mean, of course, there is the idea of classical sorcery coming from the wisdom of Solomon and the magic of Solomon, and Solomon was, of course, given dominion over the demons, over the angels, over the jinn, over all spirits of the cosmos by Yahweh himself, with not only the seal of Solomon, but what we know now as the Star of David, things like that. So, but does that predicate the fact that somebody has to be of faith or believe? Kind of that idea of like, well, I can't be affected by a voodoo witch doctor because I don't believe in voodoo.
Well, this is when I have to make a distinction between the archetypes the phenomenon incarnates as and the proto-intelligence behind it. Mm. People are going to say, I say that often, I do, because I have to get it in our heads that this phenomenon, at least the proto-intelligence, leans into archetypes, because that's a lot of times that's what we expect it to be. Sure. And so it's a designed evasion. It's designed to interact with us with the least possible visibility. And so they look for an emanation, an expression of the proto-intelligence. But that expression itself is designed to trigger behavioral patterns in us, where it can monitor, right, our perceptions of it, and at the same time give us a guided, staged encounter where if I manifest as Yeshua or Jesus, you're going to behave a certain way.
Yeah.
So it's not right.
Hold on, because I
hit a nerve, buddy. Yeah, cool.
That's not it. Where is it? There it is. I was like, I know I have an applause button somewhere,
there
because literally we've talked about it with you. We talk about it with other guests regularly. The idea of, yes, I believe that there is a massive, possibly proto-human or hominid creature roaming the forests of North America that we may know as Sasquatch, and beyond, other continents as well. However, I believe that there is also something in the woods that is fully willing to use the trope in our mind of being okay with seeing a Sasquatch as literally the backdoor consent, like you've left the window open for the vampire.
Yes. Why are you knocking on my door? Why did you build one?
Yeah, and one of those, like, because you would be okay with seeing a Sasquatch, now you've given them consent to transform into a Sasquatch, something that you would be okay with and experience with, which then can give them further consent.
Absolutely, yeah. So in some ways, they do act like programs, right? They're programs that are designed to predetermine responses within the experiencer, to modify our behavior, and in a way to manipulate us. I mean, that's the only way I can explain it. I mean,
sure.
This is why I'm kind of deconstructing the demonology I inherited, even within the field. And I don't say this in a cantankerous way.
No.
But I've been largely disappointed with demonology in the field because it's stuck within a single paradigm of thought, and that is pomp and circumstance. It's not in depth, it's not quantifiable, it's not anywhere near academic.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it like that, because people are going to come at me and say, well, who are you? I get it, I understand. But somewhere we have to think outside of the intellectual coffin and approach the phenomenon where it's at. Not, again, not within this stringent, dominating dogmatism, because we push that narrative. Horns and hooves. And by the way, they're all Catholic. And guess what happens, my friend?
You're welcome.
Yeah.
We've had that conversation on and off air.
Well, again, I just told a story on the Rex Bear show where I know a man who they were investigating this level of haunting. And so they're thinking, okay, this is a demon, and obviously the demon's Catholic. And so they get this Catholic priest in there. They go into the hottest room, or at least from activity standpoint, but the coldest room in terms of feel. The coldest room in the house. It was the most haunted part of the house, and everybody knew it. So he takes a vial of holy water, throws it in the middle of the room, and they watch the phenomenon cipher the holy water from the vial.
Wow.
So what are we, again, when we are looking at these case studies and we see the paradoxical non-truism present, it's a demon until it's not. From my perspective, my desk, it looks like there's a difference. It's the archetype the phenomenon's wearing, and then there's the proto-intelligence that's wearing it. Yeah. In that case study itself, it demonstrated, sure, I can manifest as this, but make no mistake, the intelligence behind the archetype does not play by those rules. And this is why, again, I believe that some of these incarnations were designed to manipulate our species and to get us into practices and belief systems that may not at all be true.
Well, and yes, and that is a prime example right there, where you're talking about the idea of a belief system that may not be true, and being convinced into that, and convincing masses of people into that, so that consent from masses of people are there to continue things along for millennia at that point.
Right.
And especially when you're talking the ideas of, like you were just mentioning a minute ago, the idea of practicing some sort of magic that seems to span all of these religions, that seems to universally unlock, like a master key, the door of faith to the believer, to allow this experience to happen. You know, where you might think that, you know, because you are a loyal Hindu, that this won't happen to you, because you would be able to know the signs. It will use your faith in your religion in the way that it needs to in order to gain that access.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll take it a step further. It's more disturbing. It's possible that they created these religious figures. They created these archetypes as authority leaders, and then, in a sense, and later on in the future, they can manifest as that entity, as that avatar, as an archetype.
Yeah.
In order to guide us, and we've seen that throughout history. Where even like with Alexander the Great, he writes his diary, talks about these flying shields. I said this the other day, and they looked at me like I was crazy. Who's to say they weren't flying shields? Right? Yeah. Because if the phenomenon can construct or at least create physiological constructs, and that would be the archetype. What does a shield do? It's there to protect. I don't know. I'm just playing with these terms here, but he documented that they were trying to conquer this city, and out of nowhere, this flying shield shows up, hovers over the wall, shoots a beam of light at the wall, implodes the wall. Now, you know, gives access to Alexander the Great and his army. So there are forces that have literally guided history, and guided history through the incarnations of archetypes. Now, this gets into Carl Jung and some philosophical nuances. But what I'm suggesting here, everyone, is that some of this does have connections to tulpas in what is now called tulpamancy. We were, you know, some of this there is truth in terms of the legends. We have to sift it through it, rather. And so with tulpamancy, we were always taught through Tibetan mythology, mysticism, that this was a thought form. And I think that is true to a degree, but I also think the phenomenon is forming the thought that becomes a thought form.
Yeah.
So forming the thought that becomes the thought form. This gets back into the Philip experiment. Did Philip exist? Who's to say he didn't?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know,
even the thought in the mind.
Well, and even the idea that we talk about regularly on the show, Nathaniel, the concept of basically what remote viewing is based on. The idea that, you know, are scientists affecting their experiment when they go home and think about their experiment outside of the lab. The idea of, did I burn my house down thinking that I left the iron on? Did I leave the iron on? And did you think that hard enough to turn the iron on and burn your house down? So the idea of a tulpa, the idea of, and to take that one step further, of an egregore, that is even perchance created by fear in society, a conglomerate fear or concern in society, can create this. The prime example would be the Night Stalker. Quite literally, Wes Craven was afraid that he had created a spirit that embodied the Night Stalker when he created Freddy Krueger, and that people's love of that character literally embodied and possessed the Night Stalker, and took him into his journey of killing and what he did.
Dude, that's such a unique aspect here you're mentioning, because there are plenty of cases within serial killer pathology where at the end of the day, and this is nuts, but this is factual, at the end of the day, they're killing for a demon.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a show with a guy a long time ago.
It was for my father.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. This one individual was actually, it was in contact with Dennis Rader. And Dennis Rader, obviously, he's been in prison now. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but he had, they were sharing letters with each other, is what happened. And Dennis Rader kept signing the end of his letter with Rex. He would draw a rabbit. And finally, this individual asked him, who is Rex and why is there a rabbit? Like, why aren't you signing it Dennis? And he said, because I'm going to tell you something I never told anybody. He said, is that Rex has been the demon I have been killing for. He's not the only one. I mean, people have heard this in my mouth before too, where it's like Jeffrey Dahmer. His favorite movie was The Exorcist, and before he would kill, he would go into trances. The only living victim of his was a man, and before he escaped Jeffrey's house, he said that Jeffrey tried to drug him. So he comes stumbling out of the bathroom, he looks around, and there's Jeffrey Dahmer doing this, speaking in an unknown language, watching The Exorcist.
Interesting.
There are tons of them out there. So
interesting. Yeah.
That's a whole other show. We got to do a show on that one day.
Because quite literally, that is one of the signs of demoniac possession, is speaking in a language unknown to the victim, unknown to the possessed, something that they in no way, shape, or form would know or have exposure to or anything like that. And when you start talking about especially the roots of a lot of Abrahamic religions, Nathaniel, you do start seeing the idea of, especially of the sins of the fathers, the idea of sins, mortal sins, things being carried over very much in the root of reincarnation way, almost where it's like that soul is reborn because of those sins, and reborn into family lines and stuff like that. So even utilizing that, and especially when you're talking these tulpas, these demonic creatures using our religious tropes, or even possibly creating our religious tropes. This may be one of the religious tropes that was created by them in order to make it, this is regular, this is commonplace, this is something that is accepted by the faith, so that whenever it happens, it's nothing to really consider, nothing to really think about within a household. Whenever missing fetus syndrome happens, it's nothing to think about,
right.
And that was something that Daryl Sims brought up, actually, whenever we interviewed him recently, Nathaniel, was this, quote, protocol. He called it an app that was installed by abductors, by aliens, whenever they abduct people. And this app has the protocol of, you as the experiencer, you as the victim, will erase, delete, or forget any evidence from this experience.
I talked about a case study earlier with Rex, where it was one of Dr. Carla Turner's experiences, and this fetus went missing, but in a different manner. And she had gotten pregnant by an entity during an abduction, and she was having complications in carrying this child. And then she went into the bathroom and gave birth to it.
Wow.
We could only read, this was told Dr. Turner, the only thing I remember was that it was a hybrid, and that I put it in a jar, which now I'm thinking of an homunculus, right? Homunculi. But she said I put it in a glass jar and I buried it somewhere. And she did not have access to any more memories regarding that situation. That's all they allowed her to have. So the problem is this, my friend, there's a lot that they're wanting us to remember. I'm not really worried about that. I'm worried about what they're wanting us to forget.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the paranormal iceberg, where there's more beneath the surface that we're not cognitive of at this point.
Interesting. And especially magically, the idea of a homunculus, the idea of the external combination of DNA from the womb, from outside of the womb specifically, to create life that is programmed for purpose. A homunculus is very much a biological golem in a way.
100%.
You know, where it's
Biological
like
avatar. Yeah.
you have created this homunculus to basically be not just an avatar, but also like but to go back to the beginning of the conversation and the idea of sorcery being used, it's your familiar. You're using this homunculus as not just a stand-in for you to go gather things in places that you can't go gather them and stuff like that for your magical ritual, but also the same way that you would use the energy of your familiar to help boost
100%.
your energy in your religious and magical practice.
Yes. And this is, it's kind of demonstrative of what we're dealing with in the field. It's not just science, it's science and spirituality. I am currently fascinated by one of the Lapis Levi's quotes, and I've quoted it for like every day now because I'm still trying to comprehend it. He said, we have materialized spirit. Now we need to spiritualize matter.
Ooh.
And I think that encapsulates the paradigm we're in. It's not just science, it's science and spirituality. One of them birthed the other, and I'm not sure which.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I mean that's good Lord, man. We could get into how many angels dance on the head of pins for generations. Because it is a chicken and the egg situation, you know. And I guess it is that kind of concept of, well, there are very specific enzymes that are needed to create an egg. So you can't have an egg without a chicken that has those enzymes to create the shell.
Yeah, there's a beginning in there somewhere.
And that's where you philosophically have to get into it, or consider the fact that these beings were not created here, and are not of here, which is why they are the chicken and we are the egg. You know,
yes.
Where
and, you know, we good.
Yeah, like we were saying earlier with Lilith, and how that became incubus, things like that. Very much, once again, possibly a teaching that was passed down from them to explain their presence.
Yes, the cultivating of consciousness within the womb and the preservation of the fetus itself. Getting back to Lil, there are two different texts. One is in the Phoenician, the other one's in the Akkadian. Both of them point to what were called little spirits, L-I-L, little spirits, that they were discarnate or discarnate consciousness, disembodied entities who were seeking to be re-embodied again. Now, this is going to blow some minds, but the incubus shares a linguistic heritage with incubate. This is because there were times, that the entity would not only inseminate, but it would lay on top of the body and incubate what I have determined to be the images of the dead.
Oh my God. The old hag syndrome, the idea of like what happened to me, the night terror with the thing on top of me. It's quite literally mother henning.
Yes,
it's spiritual young inside of you. Oh geez, I just got freaking goosebumps all over me, man. Holy crap!
This is the real deal. This is why demonology has to catch up. It has to catch up. This is groundbreaking stuff. Here's why.
We've talked a lot, man, and this is the first time that I think that that it's ever been cracked open like that. That's wow.
Right.
Nathaniel.
This is why one of the earliest pictorial traditions of the incubus is not him inseminating. It's him incubating. It's him laying on top of the womb of the woman. So again, this intelligence is interwoven into mythology. And the problem
Yeah.
is, if we do not know mythology, we don't know the methodology. If we don't know the methodology, we'll just think they're all aliens. We'll think they're all demons. We won't actually get down beyond the narrative and look at the bloody footprints.
Yeah.
So, but again, I don't think that this is. I think they're practitioners. I mean, my God, Father Shari was following these entities as they were copulating with women, and that was primarily their victimology, was fertile women, not just women, but fertile women. And that after some of them have died, they're peeling back eyelids. See them? They're peeling back eyelids and finding that this entity, now this is what I'm thinking. I used to think it was an entity. No, it's a practitioner. That he was carving his own sigils underneath their eyelids. Why?
Wow.
These are practitioners. This is necronetics. And I think that we need to level our game up, because in order for us to get the right answer, we have to ask the right question.
Well, and it's interesting, Nathaniel, because one of the things, and take it how you will, folks, because of course it is Old Testament. It is old Jewish tradition and teaching, but necromancy specifically is a no-no, followed closely by sorcery.
Most definitely.
And both of those are like explicitly big. It says like herbalism, using herbs for medicine, things like that. Go after it. Go after it. Go do it. Use the plants for whatever purposes under creation they're used for, you know. But it specifically warns against communing and communicating with the dead, which is why the Jewish and many Abrahamic funerary traditions are so strict about get that body moving. Get that body moving to its resting place. Don't let it sit there. Don't let it be around children. Don't let it be around the family. Don't let it be around as few living people as possible. And you ceremonially put that thing away.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, matter of fact, so the very first manifestations of the phenomenon surrounded funerary rites. And depending on how that body was buried, that individual could become a good ghost or a bad demon, and then would return to haunt that family. And so this is when we get into the Katamu inscription. It was during what's called the Zincurli expedition. The University of Chicago financed a group of archaeologists to go to northern Syria. They started excavating, and they found what's called the Katamu inscription. And in this man details where he wants to be buried. And he says, now my soul will be there in the staylight. And I want you to build an altar for my disincarnate spirit. And so the very first manifestation, the phenomenon in our species, was how we honored the dead. And that, again, that doesn't mean that we were honoring them. That very well could be the phenomenon manipulating us, right? Getting what it wants from us. But at least some of the incarnations that led to these incantations originated in antiquity with respect to funerary rites. That's why this is so funny. I was at Rex. You know, Rex asked me earlier, when did this all begin? I believe it began with death, and that's when a lot of our demonology began. That's when we get the idea of gods, demigods, deities. So, but kind of punting here, I guess, is kind of, I digress, is yes, the phenomenon leans in and out of archetypes. We've known that. The problem is now we have to stop looking at titles and saying, okay, well, if it says it's a guide, it's going to be a guide. We have to look at the behavioral patterns. Because just like with any serial killer, sure, they have different aliases, but their ritual will be the same. And that has been the highlighting factor that has united my research. These case studies are punctuated by the presence of these rituals. They're through and through, inducing in a dreamlike state, sometimes actually force feeding the experiencer a potion. So we got to do a whole show on this someday, which I can be more prepared for, I guess. But yeah, so it's not just the incubus, it's to incubate.
Yeah.
And this kind of blended these gender roles within mythology because they couldn't determine, right? Early demonologists suggested that they were one and the same, the incubus, succubus. Why? Because depending on what the entity needed, it would manifest as. Which again, what is that? The archetype.
Yeah, precisely. It's using that mental trope, that thing that you would be looking for, that you would be okay with, to further that experience, and that is a disturbing concept, Nathaniel, because we as humanity believe deeply. We believe deeply, and it's hard for most people to accept the fact that, like, their Facebook feed is deceiving them.
Right.
Much less the fact that their faith may be deceiving them. That parts of their faith may be deceiving them, or even opening them to not even near occasion of sin, but near occasion of danger.
Right. To a point that by the time they need to run, they can't. They have been arrested by their worldview.
Yeah. And that's a hard phenomenology that is coming up to just about everything, not only in the paranormal, but the parapolitical, the political, everything, Daniel. We have about 10 minutes left with you. How do we begin to rectify this situation? And I mean, of course, there's no law that's going to be passed that's going to prevent a entity from soul swapping your DNA and moving forward. However, what can we do as individuals? What can we spiritually do? What can we do to open our eyes to the situation? And what can we do to help inform others who may be in danger of this because of their beliefs?
Well, I think that ignorance can be consent. Where if we don't want to learn about it, we have no defense mechanism when it manifests.
Yeah.
So literacy can be weaponized against them. We also need to test every spirit. People are gonna say, "Okay, that's too religious. I don't care." Yeah, so you got to test the spirit. Not everything that glitters is gold, and I hate to be, drawing a cliche there.
Yeah.
But as it stands right now, even researchers like myself and others I've worked with, we're still trying to vet this phenomenon. And the closest thing we can come to is, if it is a guy, test it. If it's a deceased ancestor, test it against the historical record.
Yeah.
If it is Yeshua, is it first century Yeshua, or is it the westernized Jesus? Right? What is it teaching you? And we have to move beyond the miracle and test the message.
Yeah.
That is something that the Vatican has recently published papers about, because they're coming to the same conclusions. If not every apparition is truly Marian, then that means one thing, that there is an intelligence out there that is appearing as that archetype. And they're trying to draw a line of distinction, right? Not every lover is light, right? Yeah. Not everything that glitters is gold, and not everything that seems to be angelic is. People miss that. They think, oh my God, he changed himself into an angel of light. Well, if an angel of light comes to you, I am, at least in my mind, I'd be like, okay, yeah, maybe that's a problem.
I'm still going to ask questions when I see the angel of light. I still ask questions about my ecstatic experiences that happen to me to this day. I tell people all the time, but believe it, like, the whole reason I have these conversations is because of my experiences that I had at the altar. Things like that, that were quite literally like by location to somewhere. Amazing, beautiful things that moved me and changed my life Nathaniel, but I still question them. I'm still curious about them, and I'm still willing to accept another explanation should it come along. Still fully welcome to. And that's the thing, is that if we get locked into a mindset that is so black and white that we forget without the gray, there's no picture on the TV.
Right.
That's when you can be manipulated, not just by man, but by the spirit. And that's when it's very easy to open a door, because you once again aren't testing the spirit that's coming up against, and that's one of the concerns that I actively have with let's say, and one of the questions that I ask regularly of the CE5 protocol with Dr. Stephen Greer, where quite literally the protocol is there are no bad alien species. There's no aliens that have ill intent, and that may very well be. However, you are asking a mass group of people with intent to call upon something to appear and come to us as we are asking you to. Now, that is a very open-ended invitation.
Yes. And in juvenile, because we teach our kids to not take candy from strangers. We lock our doors, but we have no problem manipulating that which we cannot define yet, which is consciousness.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to speak utterances and modify our behavior and our dietary traditions, all of that, in hopes that, again, the problem though is the phenomenon has convinced people that it's modern. If it's modern, it's not ancient. If it's not ancient, then you don't have those case studies. You have these.
Yeah.
And it's laughable on its face. And the reason it's laughable, again, is because I think the phenomenon has control over a lot of the field, to where people don't even want to platform these intellectual pursuits.
Yep.
I've done it. I've done shows where they've shut it down afterwards. Not because it wasn't good research, mind you. Not because it wasn't real research, but because it wasn't the model of the phenomenon they wanted to promote. So again, who's forming the thought behind all of this? And so it's distressing, but honestly, I don't really care. You know me, man. I do me. And I let the cards fall where they may.
Well, and quite literally, I mean, I've had comments on my stuff. I'll be straight with you folks out there on YouTube. You can have nasty comments for a guest if you want. They typically just get deleted. They don't even get responded to. If you would like to have an open-minded debate, if you would like to ask questions, things like that, I'm sorry I don't get to answer a lot of them live, actually. But I'm busy hosting the show and pushing buttons and pulling up content related. But when I see them after, and believe me, we've had them with some guests where people get rough. And it's like, that is not conversation. You came to the table there with like 8 layers of brick laid to that wall, and that's not conversation. And that behooves nobody, gets us nowhere, because whether it's scientific research, whether it's research into the paranormal, whether it's research into your family DNA, Nathaniel, research does not happen in a vacuum. By definition, it cannot happen in a vacuum. Research means you are reading the work of other people, means you are bouncing the ideas off of other people, means that you are actively experimenting on the ideas and knocking them around and what have you. So by definition, research does not happen in a vacuum. You've got to be ready to have open conversation about this. And it's a thick and hard topic, but one that, as we are burgeoning on that point of connection, as we are burgeoning on that, because I had somebody years ago, and I had my clock wrong, just so you know. We have about 10 minutes left, but I had somebody years ago who was very connected with a big UFO media outlet, things like that. I asked him to come on the show. We'd been connected on LinkedIn for years and years, and he was like, I would love to, Chris. I've seen your show. Steve, I've seen the posts. You have some amazing guests. I do not talk about these things anymore. There have been too many scientists I know that have been silenced or been killed. There are too many researchers I know that have randomly disappeared. So I won't go on and talk about UFOs and their connection to things and stuff like that anymore, because of that. And quite literally, when you're talking about religious conversation being shut down because of this kind of topic, Nathaniel, that's dangerous to me. And I mean, even a big problem with my faith was the fact that they did not have an answer for my experience. It had zero. And I love the fact that they've reopened the College of Exorcism in Rome. Beautiful, amazing. They see that there's a need for it. But what are we doing to educate the common person about that? What are we doing? What can we do, Nathaniel, to begin to educate the common person, religious or not? Because that's the thing, is this goes beyond a religious aspect.
Oh, yeah.
Understanding it goes beyond a religious aspect. You don't have to be Christian for this to happen to you, and you don't have to understand Christianity for it to happen to you.
Yeah, that's another trope that's often propagated in the field, that you have to be in the occult to be abducted. And honestly, there are times when I just question, like, what data are you working with to suggest that, right? I've heard that over and over and over again, and it has to be cherry picking data. Has to be. That's not to say that, that there are tons of cases where the occult connection is present. But what it does, though, is it kind of manipulates the data in order to kind of frame a narrative that's non-existent. And it punishes experiencers. Oh, you were abducted? Are you in the occult? Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay, yeah, blame the experiencer. It's my fault. Well, yeah, sure.
Precisely. The idea that, every alien experience is demonic. That all of these things are sourced, or even that, everything within a red circle is a disembodied demonic Nephilim.
Well, even that narrative, I just think that a lot of people are confused by it. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, they have bodies. These things have bodies. How do they have bodies? Which that's been, kind of a motif being discussed now in the field, especially by ufologists and MUFON, where, okay, if these are demons, why do they have bodies?
Yeah.
And what I found more than often is, like, they strawman the demonological position. And they strawman it for one of two reasons. Either they don't know too much about the subject matter, and they're thinking, okay, demonology is that one, which I'm not saying it's not. What I'm saying, it's much deeper. And so they're thinking, okay, Conjuring, oh, so this is not the Conjuring, therefore, and again, this is the byproduct of promoting people that they fit the moniker. But when you get down to actually conversing about case studies, I remember one time I went to a Paracon. I asked him, okay, what do you think about the Nephilim? He was a demonologist, and he looked me right in the eyes and said, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So when there are atheists who don't even believe in Nephilim, that know more about Nephilim than demonologists, that's when I started realizing, okay, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to be a part of this. I want to, I don't know, either go to school and get a degree, get a PhD in mythology and folklore. But what I'm suggesting here is that the reason the phenomenon has had so much room to play with the demonic archetype is because we've known so little about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and because, much like the same reason why science hasn't touched most of these paranormal topics with the 10-meter cattle prod, it's all within a Kleenex box. And when you homogenize everything, it's hard to get to the root of it. And even to loop this back in the last 8 minutes of conversation, Nathaniel, to the fact of they can't be demons because a demon doesn't need magic doesn't need
There we
sigils,
go.
doesn't need ritual by which to possess somebody. They don't need that. They don't need that. They may utilize you doing that to possess you, but they don't need to carve a sigil in you. Ain't no demon need to do that.
This is some deep research here, my friend, because you're exactly right. That's when I had my entire model of demonology just shattered.
Yeah, absolutely.
It fell apart like paper mache, and it had to. Before new models of the phenomenon emerge, we have to destroy older ones. We can no longer sustain them in the field, because what we've done is we've used ignorance and dogmatism to prop up archetypes that the phenomenon has therefore inhabited.
Is this something that we can search through former magical texts, things like that, former magical traditions, and maybe find a counter solution for, so to speak? And I hate to say, that we need a magical solution, but quite literally gathering 1,000 people in a church on a Sunday to pray to a common cause is no less different. As much as I hate to tell you folks, it's no different than casting a spell. That idea that, is there something out there that can negate this, that can, because you look at the works of like Aleister Crowley and the things that happened in New York at quite literally the same building that happened in Ghostbusters, Central Park West, the not Amaranth, but I'm trying to remember the name of the working. But the idea of trying to bring about a being into this realm.
Oh, Amun-Ra, the working. Yeah. There's Babylon working, Amun-Ra,
Yeah.
Well, let me say this. This is going to be a heavier statement than it sounds. But in a way, in order to hide the antidote, you have to hide the poison. And thus far, the incantations, the incarnations, the rituals, there is a higher order of sorcery that these practitioners are performing.
Yeah.
And they don't want us to know. Here's why: because that's the poison. And inside the poison is the antidote. And they don't want us to know the antidote.
Well, and we had a listener who mentioned in the chats, these entities can create entire breakaway realities, which never happened.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, virtual reality scenarios. And they're stage managed, tailored to the experiencer, which is disturbing because, like I've said before, by the time we understand what's going on, sometimes we don't. It's like the question we were talking about earlier, like, okay, how many people have been abducted that are in the occult? We don't know. Why? Because we don't know how many people have been abducted. We only know the people who remember it. Yeah.
No, exactly.
So the data set's not really accessible at this point.
Well, it's like getting the war story from the survivors only. Only from the victors. If you only get the story from the victors' side, you don't really understand the entire scope of the battle and the way that things are actually going down if you only get things from one side of the story.
Yes, and if the enemy is fabricating or moderating the information coming out, that's even bigger problem.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that, once again, especially when you're saying that quite possibly many of the deep religious things regarding this that are out there, and even the obfuscation of that and removal of that from teachings, from what used to be commonplace teachings to now something that's almost anathema to talk about in some churches, are quite possibly part of that plan, and part of that manifestation coming to reality, that they have bred themselves into these parts specifically to spread that message.
Yes. And even with respect to technology, we have evidence that the technology we were given as a divine impartation by these beings,
Wow.
that they had actually possessed and merged memory within memory and matter together, and we're looking at the matter. It's technology, and
Yeah.
so we're thinking, no, it's an invasion of. They're going to be on the White House lawn. No, 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 no. They were built into the technology given to our species, and they manipulated their own weaknesses. And now we're thinking, my God, have mercy. Look at this new technology, not realizing that when we implant that, we're implanting them.
Yeah.
They are not just someone. They became something to inhabit someone. And this is the position we're in as a species. It's not just manipulation; it's deprivation.
Yeah.
It's symbiotic parasitism in the manifesting as technology. Put this in a body. Where did we get that? We got that in northern Syria through esoteric rituals, through necromancy. But it's being reinterpreted as ufology. And I think that it goes back to the source.
I don't even want to get into where that connection comes in with transhumanism, Nathaniel, and the idea of implants and everything else. We'll have that in and of itself is another story and another episode entirely. I always love our conversations, man. They get
Thank you.
It literally went like 3 layers of Pringles deeper tonight than we've ever gone. Like I am wrist deep in the box of Pringles right now. So
there's been research that I've held back, that I want to release.
Well, and make sure that you're doing that in the right ways, because this stuff, it's amazing how petty some of these fields can be, the way that people steal other people's research, take other people's research, take credit for their work, all kinds of things. There are probably 3 different guests that I know that have either had their books entirely taken from them by publishers, or movies taken from them by publishers and not put out. Just things like that, man. So be careful with your work. Know that you're always trusted here. It will never go anywhere. I love our conversations on and off air. I love your work. I adore it. I think it is so entirely important for the world as these things, as protocols like CE5 start making it out into the wild and things like that, that people are instructed that these things are out there. Cuídate, folks. Be careful, because they're there. They're real. I'd love to say you have to believe in it. I'd love to say, if you can stick that poppet with a needle all day long, I don't believe in it. But I don't think that's the case with this. So, Nathaniel, thank you so much for your time as always. Where can everybody go to reach you if they have a situation, if they have, let's say, family with missing fetus, that kind of stuff, if they are being oppressed by this kind of stuff, where can they reach out to you? Where can they come to you to collaborate with research?
Oh, I've kind of shut a lot of things down.
Yeah.
I'm a minimalist at heart. So if you want, you guys can follow me on Instagram, the Nathaniel Gillis. If you want to follow my newest interviews and my guest appearances, go to YouTube under my name. You'll see my YouTube page, and then there'll be a guest appearance playlist there you can find. But thank you, my friend. Always a pleasure, man. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, brother. I'll be sharing links and all that kind of stuff. So you take care of yourself, my friend. Be safe out there, and Godspeed to you and yours, all right?
Thank you, sir. God bless.
All right. Take care, man. Always an amazing conversation with Nathaniel Gillis, everybody. While you are online checking out his interviews, checking out his work, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. Curious Realm is where you can like, follow, subscribe. That's where you can find everything that is Curious Realm. That is where you can also find Curious Research. We are proud to have just finished scanning and preparing the Hayden Hughes UFO and paranormal files. Those things will be going up into MUFON's Project Aquarius, things like that, as well as Hayden Hughes UFO Research Center website coming up soon. So we'll be talking with Mindy Tautfest about all of that. She is the holder of that archive. We had a great time over the last 4 or 5 days up there in Oklahoma City, scanning all of those documents, preparing all of this stuff for archivation, for digitization, for welcoming into the world of shared research. Because once again, the sharing of research is what is important, folks. Research does not happen in a vacuum. And remember, the first step of research is you, the observer. Without observation, without experience, science does not begin. That is the first step, is observation. So we'll be getting into that with Mindy. We'll be getting into the importance of this archive. That is a lot of the work of Curious Research. Stop on by curiousresearch.org today, folks. Make sure to get your copy of the observation and encounter log. So while you're out doing your field research, you can get all of your data down, because while a picture may be worth 1,000 words, it's only worth that 1,000 words to the people that were there when the picture was taken. To the rest of us, it's just a picture. To science, it's just a picture. They need the 1,000 words. So we'll be getting into that right after this, everybody, with Martha Hazzard Decker. We will be talking about taking witness statements in the paranormal, how to kind of separate wheat from chaff, things like that, and the importance of getting that information as fresh and as real as possible when it happens in real time, right after this. The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com, or visit the official Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back from that short break. Thank you so much. And also, thank you so much to our sponsors, especially people like True Him Science. Christopher Lynch here in Austin, Texas, is the founder of True Him Science. I ran across him probably about 5 years ago, when I was told by my doctor to start maybe using CBD for some of my travel anxiety. And that began my search as I traveled the country, looking at dispensaries for different CBD products. And I ran across Christopher Lynch here in Austin. True Him Science is amazing. They use a spagyric process, alchemical process, using every part of the plant, seeds, stems, everything is used and reused until it's combusted down to nothing. Probably the only stuff I've ever found with a terpene profile to it. So stop on by and check them out, folks. TrueHimScience.com is the website that you want to go to. Curious7 is the code that you want to use to get 7% off your entire cart of $50 or more, and get two free 50 milligram CBD treats on the way out the door. Our guest in this segment is Martha Hazzard Decker. She is the author of so many books about the paranormal. She has investigated a haunted Hill House. She put out a book about paranormal investigation a few years ago, and her new book, which is coming out, is all about interview techniques in the world of the paranormal. How, if you're an investigator, if you're a field investigator for MUFON, if you're an investigator who is taking accounts from witnesses of the paranormal or cryptids, knowing how to separate the wheat from the chaff, let's say, is a skill set that you definitely want to have. I'm not going to say BS meter, but welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show. Martha Hazzard Decker, how are you, my friend?
Hi, I'm doing great.
And like I said, I'm not going to say BS meter, but there is that quality to it whenever there are, sadly, folks, some people out there who, yes, even though they are adults, are still attention seekers and need a certain level of attention from people, and sometimes will glom into paranormal or cryptid communities or UFO UAP communities and share experiences that don't exist so that they can belong. And, pray for those people, of course, but take their accounts with a tablespoon of salt. And, be ready to use some of the techniques that Martha's going to be talking about today, because it's awesome to know that, like you were saying before the interview, Martha, because we had cursorily met before at a conference out in East Texas, but we had a chance to meet. You met my wife at MUFON in Denver at our table while I was interviewing, I think it was Kathleen Martin. And then we talked a couple times, and you said you were there for the field investigator training. And like you said, the first 4 hours of their 8 hours is literally how to take an interview, how to use these techniques to be able to disseminate things as somebody explains their experience, which, as I point out regularly, is quite literally the beginning of the scientific process. Observation and experience. Like, once you've had an experience, the science has begun. Now you're the scientist. So let's start getting into your years as a police officer and a law enforcement officer, because that's really where a lot of this is rooted for you, as far as interview and being able to take witness statements, things like that.
Quite a bit. As a journalist, of course, I started learning to ask questions, and then in law enforcement, I learned how to ask nosy questions and go in much deeper. And, I still use it today, because as a process server, when I try to see if somebody's at a house to serve them the court documents, and I'm talking to somebody else, who every once in a while is that person. And I know when I walk away that that's that person. And sometimes if I hang around long enough doing my documentation before leaving, they feel bad and they'll come out and go, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's me."
Yeah, right.
And when they say I lied, I want to say, I know.
Yeah. Just pull out the folding table and set up camp with a little jug of coffee, I'll wait then, But really, when it comes down to it, like you said, being able to spot that and being able truly to trust your gut, because a lot of it comes down to not only trusting your gut, but micro expressions, the way that people respond to questions, the way that people respond to questions when repeated. So, how do these techniques used by law enforcement, things like that, translate over to the world of the paranormal and paranormal research, Martha?
It transfers. I mean, if you do the exact same things, you go in with an open mind, and often you already know a lot of the information, and you're just trying to get them to verify, confirm, but yet you have to go in with an open mind when you do interview them. You don't go in and judge them. You just go in unbiased and build a rapport with them, so they feel like they can tell you the truth. And when they're doing that, though, a lot of times, you'll You get a feeling off of them too, if they're being truthful or not. For example, remember a bunch of years ago that one family, I think down in Florida, said that their little boy flew away in a hot air balloon or something. And they were looking for him all over, but he was in the house the whole time. The family wanted notoriety.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and with all these different shows on TV, within all the paranormal, the UFOs, the cryptids, I mean, everything, there's so many different shows where people sometimes want to be on TV, so they make up stuff, or they want somebody like, say, my team, or one of the well-known or better-known reputable teams to go in and say, yes, your place is haunted, because they want to be able to say they're a haunted restaurant or business-wise. And we had one like that several years ago up in Jefferson, Texas.
Yep.
They wanted to sell one of their houses, and it was part of one of the events with a conference up there. They do the investigations at night going to houses.
Yeah.
There's nothing with the house. They had it for sale, and there was just nothing going on at the house. Locals would say that every once in a while they'd see a older lady, standing at the window in the kitchen, but that was it. And that's just residual. And so she got really mad when she's like, well, why aren't you in the house? As people came through, we were just giving them some safety information about watch for this or watch for that, let them know that the owner was out on the patio, a few things because there wasn't anything going on in that house. And they got really mad, or she did. Really mad.
Yeah.
She came the next year looking to beat me up. She was looking for me. She went by and waved at me, but she couldn't remember me. She'd been drinking.
Well,
her sole purpose was to come beat me up.
Oh my God. Oh my God. But that does bring something up, especially when it comes to the world of the paranormal and investigating the paranormal, and that is that want of confirmation married with confirmation bias, Martha. That idea that yes, we all want to have a similar experience. That's why we go belong to social clubs, things like that, because we want to hang out with people of like mind who have similar interests, that kind of stuff, be it faith, be it belief, be it civic duty, what have you, like that's why people go join a Kiwanis, because, hey, yeah, I like candlepin bowling, So,
hey, I was in the Kiwanis briefly years ago.
But that's why, because, hey, there's a bunch of people like oh, wow, I like to go to a sock hop. They have one every other month, that kind of stuff, because you want to hang out with people of like mind. You want to hang out with people of like belief, and that want of confirmation of belief is hard to set aside, even as an investigator, even as somebody coming in and taking a witness statement, because prime example would be Haunted Hill House. You are probably here in Texas, one of the investigators that has hands down spent more time at that location than probably anybody else in this state. Maybe the Klinger brothers might be able to come close to you or something, but I doubt that.
Well, I know. Yeah, I've spent the night alone in there more often than anybody has. And when you're talking about books, that book, I kept getting more stuff and more stuff. The more documentation, the more history that's uncovered.
Yeah.
That I finally had to just stop and turn it into a series.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it was just too much. It would have been much. If the book would have been so big, it'd be ridiculous. And nobody would want to see it. It'd be too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's the fact of whenever you're investigating something like that on a continuous basis, it can be hard sometimes to separate yourself as an investigator and look at things impartially. One of the things we talk about all the time is if you're thinking about cases of a location and thinking about stories you've heard, things like that, as you're preparing your gear for investigation to go out, you you may well actively be tainting every scientific side of your experiment by not only possibly psychically charging the atmosphere with the energy of the experiences you're thinking about in your own preconceived notion, but also going in with a preconceived notion before you ever start getting data.
Well, it's true. And when I was working on the book, I spent 3 days there by myself, not as an investigator, but as somebody that was living in the house. I wanted to keep the environment such that, regular day-to-day routine type of thing, what happened with that. And that got pretty wild on the second night. It got really wild.
Well, yeah, because you actively were pushed down the stairs, right?
No, that wasn't me. That was Maria Elena Santos Kemp, the psychic for the house, Maria, yeah. And she lives down in Austin. But that was Maria. And Maria, a lot of things don't happen to her in that house. But when when almost all of us were upstairs, and when we heard the clutter down the stairs, we thought we were going to find her, dead, broken neck, broken back, because it sounded so horrible. But she was on her back. She actually pulled the whole newel post out from the staircase, from the landing, from the floor with her hand. But when we went back and reviewed that piece, it was, you could see at the little turn in the stairs, she stopped. And you can actually, when you look out on the big screen with one of the cameras that's there, because that's why they have the cameras, so you can go back and review something while you're there to see, what happened. We actually saw something white, so it's, looks like a hand to us, but that came around as she started down, and it actually like pushed her, and we could see this. And then when she got to a certain point where she was fixing to slam face first down under the floor, you actually see this spark that goes under her, and she goes up and over the banister and lands on her back.
Wow.
And, the newel post, she did break a couple bones in her hand when her hand hit the newel post and pulled it out from the wall or from the banister and the floor. But she was laughing. She said it didn't hurt. She said it wasn't like she fell. It's like something just set her down. And we were all like, what the heck?
Yeah, because when you look at the video, like it looks like something straight shoved her into the corner of the stairs. It doesn't look like she tripped anything. I was trying to find the video. I should have found it before the show. But yeah, it's remarkable video, and it's out there, folks. And once again, to have experiences like that you've been a part of, how hard is it as somebody taking an interview from somebody who has had an experience at Hill House to come at that as a blank slate?
Well, and I have talked to a lot of younger groups, teams, and what I have learned from them is they come in with a bias. Somebody calls them and tells them this is what happened, this is the ghost, or whatever the story is, they'll run there to do an investigation, but they're going to go in and so they can prove for that person what they say, instead of just going and doing an in-depth interview and then reviewing all that, and then you go back with an investigation if you need one. And when I'm there, I do the interviews. There's at least 2 of us there, because you should always have 2 people when you go into somebody's house for your safety, because you don't know. Well, so I'm usually doing the interview, and somebody else, the other person there, is taking notes, and I'm watching their demeanor. I'm watching, any number of things with them, because with over 20 years of watching interviews of victim children, because I did that with, crimes against children. And that's where you can really see how the demeanor changes in children if they bring up the incident. And we had an Amber Alert and a death was actually a murder of a 12-year-old in the town that I worked. And I was just lucky. FBI and the Rangers, everybody happened to be in the county at that time. So I had a lot of people, we were all looking, but I just knew that I knew he was dead from the get-go. And it's just some gut thing. But just that book, the new one is coming out. Don't buy that book, Paranormal Profiling.
Oh, no.
No, don't buy that one because they owe me money. The publisher's out of business. We're out of contract.
Oh, my God.
So they're doing copyright infringement, and they have not paid me or any of the other authors that they did. They're keeping them up as Kindles, Kindle books and so on, ebooks. But that's why I'm going to keep that name with the next book coming out.
Yeah.
But it's going to have a 2 and a little bit different.
Yep.
So
good for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good for
so they do that. But with this kid, so the investigators with the sheriff's department and FBI were interviewing the family of this one boy that went missing, and they came and asked if he was he was the youngest, but there were 3 boys in the family, and when they went to interview the middle boy, they came back and they asked me if he had any kind of issues because he acted like he was like mentally not there when they were interviewing him. I said, no, he's just like a normal teenager. There's nothing wrong with him. But, and you'll see that with children sometimes when the forensic interview is being done because the demeanor changes.
Yeah, they dissociate.
So I interviewed the family about a year later for a second time. And because I pretty much knew who and what, I'm just trying to get them, because it involved the family, trying to get them to tell me what they know. And he did that. His demeanor, he was probably 16 at the time, is like, it just, mentally, he totally changed and checked out. And you would think that was probably the most extreme that I've ever seen in demeanors, in the changes. I'll see him with the little kids with some things, but as far as somebody older, that one was just, so he knows, and one day the case will actually get solved. This was a 12-year-old murdered by somebody who was head of a cartel in the county. He was only 21 years old, the cartel, but his dad is in Colombia, and he's a drug lord down in Colombia. So this one was run just like a Colombian cartel with tortures and murders and different things. And the one boy was murdered actually to teach the family more or less, like they would do, down in Colombia or somewhere. And I don't know if they owed him money or stuff was like maybe he owed up to $30,000 in money for drugs or something along those lines. Wow. And so this was to teach them a lesson.
Wow. That is
so.
And it's interesting. There are so many things like that in small towns, in very tiny towns. It's wild.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, small towns, you see it all, and a lot of the law enforcement in small towns, they have to do it all. Yeah. Where you go to the bigger, city near Dallas, they've got homicide division, and I was the lead detective, but all the other officers also investigated things, that they were called out to, and some of the more serious I would take over and handle those. So using all that experience that I gained in the interviews, and of course some of the training I had was absolutely incredible. The best was where I learned how to do a statement analysis and a non-accusatory questionnaire that you for like big groups of people. You take this and you can change the questions up to for whatever the crime was, and there's like 3 questions that stay the same no matter what and in the same spot, and there's a grid, and you give these non-accusatory questionnaires of people. Like I did this with the water department. They had $30,000 in water meters stolen. And it was like from the one place that they did not have a camera because they were overzealous with cameras with this water department. And with 35 people, they all came up there. They all got the questionnaires. I got the questionnaires. They left. But if I'd had to interview each one individually, that would have taken a really long time. And that one, it turned out to be friends of somebody that worked at the water department. It wasn't actually an employee. It was somebody else. Because I caught someone with about half the water meters. They had tried to scrap them, and I'd already contacted the scrap yards. And well, so, you know, so we got them for, $15,000 worth. But, so that was, that was good. Yeah.
And, the idea of that, of being able to, once again, use a non-effacing questionnaire where it's almost like a Minnesota multiphasical. Here's some general questions. The general questions are not only going to ask you details about your experience, but they're also going to ask you just general questions. Where it's like, if 3 or 4 of these 25 questions ring this way, this person may kind of be tilted toward this end of the spectrum and maybe on some meds.
Usually, and usually when you use that, when you're done going through everybody and grading the scores in the grid, you'll know exactly who it was. But the non-accused, but then the statement analysis, when I learned how to properly have someone give me a statement, and one of the things that I had been doing wrong that most of them do, and I didn't do it all the time, is you tell them what to write in their statement. Some people, whether they're a victim, a witness, or even if they're the subject, sometimes it's like pulling teeth just to get 2 sentences out of them.
Yeah.
So you tell, and the key is with this too, if you were to send somebody, have somebody fill out a written statement for you, there's things to look for to help determine if they're telling the truth or not telling the truth. And the same thing is, and with that is, you don't have them, if they're writing it, don't scratch out something that they started where you cannot read it. So you just draw a line through it, because a lot of times if they're being untruthful, they'll start with writing something that's the truth. And then they'll realize it and they'll scratch it out. And so you can tell if they just do that one line through, you can see the train of thought, or you can see them maybe when they talk about somebody and say they're saying it or similar words like that to describe this person, and all of a sudden the person is by name. That's another key. Yeah.
And the line through something as somebody's writing is really interesting, because that was something that that my handwriting, I went to, like, I guess it was almost like physical therapy at school, but I went to like a handwriting therapist in elementary school. And that was one of the things that he noted, was that whenever I made mistakes, I got very anxious. That it was a show of my anxiety, the fact that I hurriedly scratched it out instead of just calmly lining through it and moving forward. And
the same thing. It's the same thing with a written statement, and when you're speaking to somebody, like where. And this is really important with a statement. Where do they start? You're responding to an event, and if you're interviewing somebody out there for, cryptids or whatever, you're responding to an event. Where do they start? Somebody who's truthful is pretty much going to start with that event. Then you have the others. They're going to start way ahead. They might start a week ahead, a month ahead, what I was doing, 10 days ago, that have no relation to the actual event. They will not start there. They're going to start with something much further in the past.
Yeah.
And one of the big things I tell people too is some of them, they'll hear if you look to the right or the left, you're lying or you're recalling, and you cannot really use that as a tool. If not for the reason you need to know, is this a left-handed person or a right-handed person?
Yeah.
Because it's reverse for a left-handed person than it is for a right-handed person.
In what way? Explain that.
Well, when somebody's lying and they're trying to make up something, they're going to look up at a certain angle. They're going to look to the left or the right. And which way they look is dependent upon if they're left or right-handed. So you can't really use that. And then they look the opposite way. They're trying to recall a memory. So that one, I just don't even use that because it's, it could be part of, but not the sole thing to determine whether they're telling the truth or not.
Yeah, when you're and that just so you know, folks, that it in reference, that would be called a oh my God, it just left my head. A micro expression. A micro expression, something that, a slight roll of the eyes, things like that, as somebody speaks, that as body language goes, can give you a very good key into where somebody's at within a conversation, whether they're comfortable, whether they're not comfortable, whether they're receptive to a message, whether they're not, like you said, whether they may be fabricating something as they speak, or whether they may be trying to recall something. And even, as you said, in the example of younger teens and children, that disassociative nature that comes about, where they almost emotionally shut down as they give testimony, as they explain what happened, almost talking without affectation.
And another thing that I would do with, when I was interviewing somebody that did it with a crime, you can still do it to the same extent when you're doing this. It's when they stop talking, just be quiet, because they're the empty space where there's no talk going on. They're going to start talking again.
Yeah.
And, let them do that. That became easier for me after I became a negotiator, because you have to be a good listener to be a negotiator.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is that moment of pause. Whenever you let that pause happen, the person who's fabricating something will definitely get uncomfortable with that pause and continue fabrication, or go back and start reiterating part of the fabrication. Instead of just being like, no, like, I'm sorry, I'd like to tell you more, but literally that's it.
Yeah.
So
the other thing would be, say that you asked them a yes/no question, and for whatever reason, and they're telling you yes, but they're shaking their head no, or vice versa.
Yeah.
You go with whichever way the head's going, not the verbalization, but the head. If they say yes, but they're shaking their head no, go with that no.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. That's interesting. Now, when it comes to, let's kind of start moving things. We've got you for about another 20 minutes or so. Let's start talking about the gathering of evidence on site beyond testimony and beyond accounts from people. So how do you go about gathering data, I guess, what some would call evidence? I think we have to hit a few rungs before something is called evidence. You and I have had that conversation. Like for me, as I state on this show regularly, if you call something evidence, it better be ready to exonerate you in court. Like, It better be good enough for you to hand to your lawyer and go, I won't go to prison because of this. That's evidence, and that's the confidence that you should have in evidence. Aside from that, we're gathering data. We're gathering points of data.
You're doing that, and even when you do the initial interview, which is pretty lengthy for me, I have a brief one, on the phone, but when I get there, I leave a recorder going. I have a video record, but then all the other stuff we don't investigate then, is that we will continue through with an EMF reader, not a K2, but like a real EMF reader. And we'll go and we take base readings all around the house inside.
Yeah.
And, and this is just for us to go back, and we take photos. I'll go in all the rooms and take photos, because then we'll use that. We'll refer back to that if we actually go do an interview, to see what kind of changes, if there have been changes in anything.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
We do that. Yeah. Now, and then you literally, if you're doing an investigation, and I really don't tell a lot of people how to do their investigations.
Sure.
But look at it like a crime scene. If you watch, NCIS, FBI, CSI, or any of those where you see them going and doing the evidence gathering, it's going to be similar to some of that to a certain point. And go in, and one of the first things you'd do is you would actually draw a sketch of where something happened. Just like you would at a crime scene. You can have this sketch, and this is when you're getting really serious about doing investigation. You want to do that, which is something that could be done at the same time you do the interview, and it gives you another reference of something to go back to.
Yeah.
To see what the changes are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing to do is that I think is kind of important is there's some people who hear things, and when they do their memory, something caught their attention, and some people are visual, and trying to determine which that person is while you're talking to them will make a difference in how they answer the questions. Because, if it's somebody that's more auditory and you go, well, what did you see? They may not give you a as good of a description as if you said, well, what did it sound like?
Yeah.
What did you hear? And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Just to do that.
That is a really, really good point. As somebody who spent time in his life working in a classroom, the idea that there is an auditory learner, a tactile learner, a visual learner, like we all learn and our brains are activated in different ways. So the idea that somebody may be processing a literal experience in life through the same kind of response in your brain that you do to learn something or anything like that, that they may have a totally different auditory experience than the person who's a visual experiencer right next to them.
And that helps a lot once you figure that out with them, and then can ask them questions that are going to give them a better recall.
Yeah. Yeah. And, with the point of asking questions in mind, Martha, where do you fall? And this may be a very loaded question. Not even maybe. This is a pretty loaded question, Martha. Where do you fall with the idea of using mediums in investigation? Do you have like a specific protocol at which point you bring in a medium or something like that? Or is that something that you go to immediately in an investigation, or something that you don't use at all in your investigation?
Well, I do use it in certain ways. I have a couple of people that like, say, Margie K. I have another one, Kat Lang, she's a really good at cold reading something, with a remote viewing. And I would sometimes I would be on the scene if we're doing an actual investigations. Sometimes I will call her before I go somewhere, or I call her after, when I leave. And we kind of go back and forth. And so that initially she doesn't know anything. When I talk to somebody on the phone and I'm thinking, they're kind of, like a little loopy, I don't know about this person, I'll call Maria and have Maria call, because she's part of the team too. I'll have Maria call my team too. I'll have her call and talk to them.
Yeah. And
then see what she gets, and we'll compare notes. Same thing with EVPs sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes with EVPs, I may send those to 4 people, 3 to 5 people without saying anything, and see what do they hear?
Yeah. Yeah.
If there's something that I know is being said, but I can't understand it, and I'll get their opinions and see.
And that's just it. And that's the way that you present data to somebody, because once again, that non-aggressive questionnaire, the idea that questionnaire doesn't get anybody's blood boiling, anything like that, doesn't put anybody into a passionate state, that kind of stuff, where it gives you good information in the background aside from the experience. Whenever you share data with somebody, it can be very easy to load that data, and even the idea of, once again, having a trusted medium, somebody that you've worked with outside, somebody that personally you can trust. Like I was just hanging out, the person that I was archiving with this weekend, the example that I gave them was, as a researcher, because research does not happen in a vacuum. It does not. It cannot. By definition and true nature, research cannot happen in a vacuum. You have to have a ride or die. You've got to have same way that a rolling police officer has a partner in the seat next with him. You've got to have that person there as your backup, as your sounding board, as the person that's willing to call you out and be willing to go, I realize that you circled that with a red circle, but yeah, man, that's nothing that we need to spend our time on, that you can trust. And that is how you build that relationship with a good medium that you can trust, with a good hypnotherapist that you can trust. Because some investigations get to the point of, somebody may be suppressing memories if they've had enough violent interactions with the spirit or traumatic interaction.
Exactly. And there's been any number of investigations where there really wasn't anything going on. I had one where a grandmother called me. And so one of the people that I fall back on sometimes, he's still an active detective, but all of a sudden it's like he woke up one day and had the ability to experience and see things that he had never done. Wow. And when that first went on, we probably talked more in the first couple of months than we had in 20 years, because we just knew each other through law enforcement, and and it was just business. But sometimes I will bring him. We went to a house where the grandmother said the child, something is coming and beating her up. And sometimes he brings a gang. And when children are involved, I work a lot faster. But so we go over there. He comes with me, and they're talking about seeing, especially when everybody says they see demons in a bunch of places,
Yeah.
Because, so we go out there, and the little girl is also autistic. Mm. And it's just her and her mother and grandmother that live in this house. It's also a hoarding house. I spent, about a couple of years, seemed like almost every house was a hoarding house. And actually I learned that hoarding houses hold a lot of negative energy. They really do. Yeah. So this was a neat hoarding house. But so it's just the 3 of them. And then in the backyard where they would see these things in the trees and all this sort of stuff, the water department was behind them on one of their stations. And then there were woods. So there were all these bright lights, illuminating the the stuff back there. So anything that they would see in the trees are going to be shadows, but they're going to be illuminated by the light. So when we were talking to the little girl, I noticed that, because she was fairly articulate, but I noticed that sometimes she would hesitate and she would do this tapping on her head. And when she's really trying to remember, she would put her head on her mom and do that. So I asked her about it, and I said, well, you know, as we're asking, and of course with kids, you need to ask open-ended questions versus a yes, no. Try to stay away from those or anything that's leading. And so one of the things I asked her was, is he here now? And, you know, with us? Yes, he's here. And so I go, well, where is he? Can you show me? And it took her a couple of minutes to point somewhere. And all the while she's, you know, doing this and kind of looking at her mom or, you know, putting her head up. So that gave me a clue that there's more to this, that it's probably not anything paranormal. So that she was like 8 or 9, the little girl. So the next thing is, well, you know, can you draw what you see? She'd already said it's black, and black is bad. Black means it's demons. And I found out that the 3 of them watched Ghost Adventures together. That's where she got all of that.
Yeah.
And of course, there was a talk with Mom about appropriate TV for her, and to understand too, if they're talking about things, you think the kids are asleep. No, the kids are listening. They're always listening.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So so she drew this guy but everything was brown, and I asked about that, and there was nobody coming. So we went ahead and we looked around the house, but the detective and I went outside, and we went out back. The area where those trees were, hogs are out there. It's all torn up from hogs. And they maybe could have even had a deer come up in the back where they would see that. But as soon as we said that it's all good back there, it's just hogs, you know, lots of hogs in Texas.
Yeah.
And then she tried to say it was something else. The mother did. But the grandmother, you know, listened and took everything into account. And I usually will check back because we did not need to do an investigation there at all.
Yeah.
You know, there really wasn't anything going on, and they were just all feeding into this. But I called back a couple of weeks later just to check, because I'd like to do that follow up and see how things are going. And Grandma said, everything's been good. There's not been anything since they stopped watching Ghost Adventures together, you know, all 3 of them. And they would watch that later when she was asleep. Yeah.
And you know, that brings up something like we got about 10 minutes left, and let's address this community wise, because hey, you know, the Klinger brothers are friends. They live right down the road. They do amazing paranormal work, folks. And yes, they have been on a show. Absolutely. Like one of the first shows out there that ever happened in the world of paranormal investigation on television. And even they will say what the networks don't understand is that you're not going to find something every time you go out on an investigation. You may go out on 32 hours of investigation and get absolutely nothing. 18 times in a row, 32 hours of investigation and get absolutely nothing, you know?
Yep.
And once it starts happening on a regular basis, that is something that you need to consider whenever you are taking a witness statement. When it's the fact that, you know, like this is happening 3-4 times a week, you know, at that point, it's no longer paranormal. It's normal, you know, so you need to consider that in your witness statement when you're listening to a story, you know, the fact that something is so repetitive. And yeah, you know, when considering children and their experiences, once again, children are not typically prone to lie outright, you know, not typically. There's a kid or two here or there, you know, but what they are prone to do, and what we're prone to do as adults, definitely is mix tropes that we see with experience. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the observation log, is that you can write it down now while it happens, not hours later, once you've start filtering it through past experiences that you've heard on a location, or, started filtering it through your filter of religious belief or anything like that. As any cop will tell you, there's the whole show, First 48 on A&E, where it's like, if that murder investigation goes beyond 48 hours, data starts becoming deprecated, memories start getting lost, experiences start getting mixed up with things that you saw on TV, stuff like that. So, and it's nothing to do like, hey, the people aren't trying to mislead a police officer in an investigation. This is just the way that the human mind works. This is the way that we meld what we believe, what we experience, and what new data comes in together. This is what our brain naturally does. So unless you're somebody who psychologically understands that, or through training like you've had as a law enforcement officer understands that, it can be hard to see that as a conglomeration inside of somebody's experience.
Absolutely. And especially, when you're talking to children, after seeing, several hundred, forensic interviews with children, I pretty much follow the same pattern with children, not so much with teenagers, but with younger ones, where you do like a truth and lie authentication, open-ended questions. And when they tell their story, and especially with children, and a lot of times with adults too, is like, tell me what happened. And then you go, and then what happened? Mm-hmm. Especially with kids, and then what happened, until they're all done. Yep. And then with the kids, you may come back and get some other, definitions. And then with adults, I might say, oh, it's an angry ghost, or it's mean. And so you go back and clarify, what does it mean? What is angry? Because they may mean different things to different people.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the fact of, once again, while a child may not be prone to utterly make up an experience, what they may be prone to do, like you pointed out with that autistic child, is repeat an experience on behalf of somebody to gain the approval of that person. Be it their mother, their father, their grandma, their grandpa, grandma or grandpa told it to me like this. This is how I need to say it so that they're happy. They are prone to do that. Absolutely.
Well, and that's one of the questions you ask the child, because, it's, if you can kind of interview them in a way where the parent's not like sitting right there staring at them, it's great. Because you ask, you ask them like, do you know why I'm here? And, did anybody, tell you, what did your parents say?
Yeah.
And then the other thing I even ask them is, and it's all following through with a social history, family history with the children, is somebody who lives in your house.
Yeah.
And then they may actually list something that's not there. And then you go through, well, who's this? Who's this? Who's this? And they may talk about if there's a ghost there or something. You never know.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of the same thing. But the big thing is not to interrupt them while they're telling their story. Because, if you get interrupted, you lose your train of thought.
Yeah. 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 And that's just it. Most people who have had an experience, most people who have been victimized by something, most people who they aren't going to necessarily lose their train of thought as they're giving you a witness statement. It's gonna pretty well be an unbroken tale unless it comes to a point of trauma, and you will physically see that emote itself, be it through crying, what have you. And of course, there are ways to go through that as well. But we have you for about another 3 minutes, Martha. what can people do as they are investigating to make sure that their data is ready to be looked at by other people, ready to, because, it's kind of the idea of, yes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. If you were part of the picture, if you were at the event, like, now the picture means something to you. But if you're just looking at a picture, that's not 1,000 words. You need the 1,000 words to go with the picture. So how can people get that kind of stuff ready?
Well, if something is evidence, whether it's a footprint or whatever, make sure you have your rulers with you to put down so you can see what size it is. That's, really important to do too. Yeah. And kind of do that with everything. And that's where you would draw if you drew in the room, if it was a specific room, like you would for a crime scene, you're going to mark in there where you found the different things. So you have that in addition to that as well. Because the experiences without any evidence are just that, personal experiences. Mm-hmm. And that's, and unfortunately that's all they are.
Well,
not that you don't, not that you just believe them, but there's no evidence.
And they add to the data set. Don't get me wrong. And that's what I try to explain to people is, don't forget, as soon as you have observed or encountered, you have begun the science, whether you like it or not. That's the first step of the scientific process is observation, gathering more data on the topic, and then you move forward from there. So yeah, like it's the fact that you are the scientific instrument. You are part of the science. You are a citizen scientist. Comets aren't typically found by people at major telescope locations. They're found by backyard astronomers. Shoemaker Levy was named after the two people who were backyard astronomers that found it. So, and we are now getting ready to shake that hand of science. It's interesting to see science really taking kind of a esoteric paranormal bent with some of the things like quantum entanglement. It opens up a whole new realm of experimentation, and I think what's going to be a whole new realm of communication across many topics of esoteric and parapsychological study that have been happening for decades. So thank you so much for the time, Martha. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Where can everybody go?
Anytime.
What's that?
I said anytime.
Oh, absolutely. Where can people go to find your books? Where can they go to get a hold of you for an investigation or to give you their account? Things like that, Martha.
Well, they can go to Amazon for the book. They can find me on most social media, and I use Martha Decker, and Martha Hazzard Decker. So I don't use any nicknames or anything for that reason, so people can find me. And then my phone number is listed, with all the different social medias. So I'm not hard to find.
Yeah.
Because I'm on, everything, Instagram, TikTok, all of them.
Absolutely.
So they can find me fairly easy. Yeah.
Well, thanks again for the time. I cannot wait for the second book to come out. It's going to be awesome. Keep your eye out for that, folks, because it really is important for you to begin the process properly, whether you're putting your data down from an experience you had or whether you are taking in experiences, being able to separate those things and being able to look at them dispassionately is so important. So thank you so much, Martha, for making this one of your passions as well. I love our conversations. It's always great. I'll be sharing links and everything. Thank you so much for the time. Hold the line real quick while we close things out with the audience. While you are online checking out everything from Martha Hazzard Decker, folks, make sure to stop on by, Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can like, follow, subscribe. That is where you can get your copy of the Curious Research Encounter and Observation Log. You can find that at curiousresearch.org. We've got some exciting news coming up in the world of archiving soon from Curious Research, so stay tuned for all that. Thank you so much, as always, everybody, for your time, for your open hearts, your open minds. That is what makes the conversation. And without that, without the conversation, humanity doesn't move forward. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. To download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault, or become a sponsor of Curious Realm, visit our website at curiousrealm.com. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast and video services, curiousrealm.com, as well as KGRA Radio, APR TV, and the official Curious Realm app for Roku devices. Curious Realm is a proud member of the Ground Zero Media and Aftermath Media family of podcasts. For more great shows and members-only content, visit aftermath.media today. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, and remember, the other side is always watching.